Hey guys, welcome back to another video. So today I want to do just a quick video and overview of my Golf R, but specifically the tire and suspension specifications. So right now I'm about to swap out my winter wheels and tires for my summer wheels and tires there. And I spent a lot of time with my first Golf and my second Golf dialing in what I think is the perfect fitment and suspension setup for really maximizing your wheel and tire size that's functional, looks good, doesn't rub, and it just works. So I thought I'd walk through that today while I am swapping out my wheels and tires for the summer. So the wheels and tires that we currently have on the car are the winter setup. These are New Speed RSE 12s. They call them 12s, I think, because there's 12 spokes. That would make sense to me. The finish is hyper black. Obviously they're silver, but I believe it's a black base coat with a silver on top. It gives it kind of a darker silver look. I don't know. I think they look good. Definitely a unique finish. I like them. And the tires we have are a Continental Winter Contact. And the tire size is a 245/40/18. And this is a 18 by 8.5 wheel with a plus 45 offset. So as you can see, the fronts are pretty dang flush. They sit in a couple of millimeters, and I'll explain a little bit why that is, but they're pretty darn close to flush. They sit in just a couple of millimeters, but they are a really good fitment option for summer or winter tires. In the rear, same size, same setup, an 18 by 8.5 plus 45, both front and rear. But in the rear, we do have a 5mm spacer in there. You can see that right there. So we have a 5mm spacer with extended lugs. So with the 5mm spacer on there, that essentially makes it a 18 by 8.5 with a plus 40. So these sit out just a hair further, and they're still tucked just a tiny bit, but really pretty flush on all accounts. Now some background I should give you about the car. This is sitting on white line lowering springs. It's not a very popular company, at least for these cars. They're out of Australia. It's probably similar to a VWR lowering spring. They are lower than like a Eibach. Eibach is always generally sits a little bit higher. And I also have some Super Pro camber mounts on the front of the car. You may be able to tell just a hair that we've got additional camber in the front there. So the alignment is essentially a negative 2.2 to around 2.5 degrees on all four corners. So we have a little bit of negative camber dialed in, and that's what allows us to fit our next wheel and tire setup that we have for our summer wheels. So these wheel and tires should fit on any stock suspension or lowered suspension, Mk7, Mark 7.5 Golf R. But to run our next setup, I'll show you in a second. It's a lot tighter, a lot cooler in my opinion, but it does require these camber adjustments to make them fit. Otherwise you will be rolling and potentially ruining your fenders with these wider wheels and wider tires. Now I do like to throw a jack stand under the rear there and just resting on that while I'm lifting this up, just for a little security. I don't like relying solely on a jack in case this fails. We're not completely screwed, only kind of screwed. I like to wipe these down with a Scotch pad or a wire brush just to get some of this excess rust off of here. Now these are Audi sized wheels, I guess you'd say, more Audi spec wheel, so it has the larger center bore. So what we do is we take a hub ring. I believe this is a 66.6 millimeter. Volkswagen's a 57.1. So I use these hub rings just to bring these back down to fit on the Volkswagen. Just pop that right in there, and we're good to go. All right, so here's the 5 millimeter spacer that I was talking about right here. Just a tiny little hub-centric spacer. So when running a spacer, even though this is only 5 millimeters, you definitely want to run extended bolts. As you can see here, we have the stock bolt on the right and the extended on the left. I believe it's 7 or something millimeters longer. I don't recall the length, but both ball seat, both OEM style, but just a little bit longer to accommodate this extra 5 millimeters. You don't want to push it, especially when it's your safety you're talking about. So just little things, make sure you do that. So each season I am swapping out the lug bolts, obviously on the rears. I definitely do prefer to hand thread the bolts in just a little bit before cranking them down, because I don't like running the risk of cross threading. So I usually give them a little bit of a hand start like this, then I'll give them a loose torque on a low level on the impact, and then once the car is on the ground, I will torque them all down to the appropriate spec. And obviously we're always torquing in a star pattern. And the torque spec, I believe, is 88 foot-pounds. I usually torque around 88 or 90. All right, so that's one side done. Obviously it's a really quick, easy job. 5 lug wheels, single jack point, lift it up, pull them off, put new ones back on, and that's it. So I'm just gonna rip out the other side really quick, and then I will be right back and we can walk through this fitment. And so here you can see a pretty decent comparison of the two wheels and tires. Obviously the summer tire on the right is much more aggressive, but a fair bit wider, even though it is only 10 millimeters wider on the section width. So again, we have a 245 on the left and a 255 on the right. This is a 255 35 19 versus a 245 40 18. Slightly larger diameter, rolling diameter on this, barely. I mean, I think it's a few millimeters. Obviously, technically a 10 millimeter wider section width, but a meatier setup overall on a 9-inch wheel, obviously, versus a 8.5-inch wheel. All right, so we've got all 4 wheels mounted on the car and torqued down. Let me walk you through this wheel setup. So these are also New Speed brand wheels. These are New Speed RSC 102s, and they are a 19x9 with a plus 45 offset. And the tires that we have on here are Firehawk Indy 500s, and they are a 255 35 19. Now, running a 255 35 19 on these cars is extremely uncommon. I did a ton of research and test fitting and everything before I was able to do this. I used to run these wheels at stock height with a 245 tire, and these wheels at stock height with a 245 tire is not the greatest look, I'll admit, but I was afraid to mess with it, and that's just what I ran. So After running it, doing some research, no one really had done this setup, and I don't know if they do now. I'm not very active on the forums anymore, but I used to be very active, and no one really had done this before. There was one person who ran a 265/30/19, so much smaller sidewall. Didn't love the look of that, but the 255s are just a nice meaty setup, and I love it. So let me show you. Obviously, these are a bit more aggressive on the Fitment side, but they are perfectly flush. If you remember, with the winter wheels that I had, they slid in a few millimeters, obviously with an 8.5 plus 45 versus a 9 plus 45. You're gaining that 6.5 roughly millimeter further push out towards the fender. So these are perfectly flush. And again, the only way to make this work is by having camber plates in the front, because you need to dial in that camber and able to get that fat tire and the wide wheel in there. If you don't, you're gonna be having your tire sitting out further and you will chew up and rub. Now, I've never rubbed with this setup before, and you know, that's all conditions, street driving, no track driving, but street driving and big bumps, potholes, whatever. These have been a very strong wheel as well. Both of the New Speed, all the New Speed products have been great, and these are all flow formed products, so they're not a fully forged, but they are, you know, semi-forged or rotary forged or whatever lingo you want to call it. They are strong, they are light. I'm a huge fan, great bang for your buck as well. Now in the rear, same setup, same specs, but no spacer this time. They sit about a millimeter further out than the winter wheels, obviously because the other ones had a 5mm spacer, and with the extra width on this wheel, you're gaining that 6.5mm towards the fender, minus the 5, so really only a millimeter and a half further out, but it is perfectly flush, and it's an awesome fitment. So in my opinion, this is the ideal kind of hot boy, if you will, fitment for these cars. It's very functional, it looks good, it doesn't rub, and you're able to put the biggest tire on there possible. Gives you a little bit extra sidewall, obviously more width. The stock width for these cars is a 235/35/19, so obviously we're 2 sizes up with a wider wheel. The OEM size is, I believe, an 8 wide, maybe an 8.5, but I'm pretty sure it's an 8 plus 50 or something. It's a pretty weak setup. I don't have my stock wheels anymore, but yeah, so this is what it gets you. I got my first Mk7 Golf R in 2016. That was a 2016 model year. Now this is a 2018, and I got this in 2018 as well. So I've got, gosh, what is that? Wow, it's crazy. Almost 9 years in the Mk7 platform. Obviously this is a Mark 7.5, but the bones of it are basically the same other than the transmission. This is the 7-speed versus the 6-speed in the Mark 7. But suspension wise, it's all very similar. This has the DSC, dynamic suspension control or something like that. But the active suspension with the hydraulic dampers and different modes and whatever. So yeah, I'm very familiar with this setup. If you have any questions with my previous setups or anything like that, you know, let me know in the comments, or if there's any other videos you'd like me to dive deeper into. I thought this would be a helpful video because when I was doing research on getting my wheel and tire setup as well as suspension, and I really wanted to go aggressive, I was really having to dive deep in the forums. And you know, there's a lot of people who say things work and they don't because they've torn up their fenders and stuff and they just don't care, or they're afraid to get more aggressive and try new things. So I thought this would be helpful. I know this is an older platform now, and the Mark 8s and Mark 8.5s are starting to come out as well. I know those are also very similar chassis setups as this. I don't know what their fitments are like, but Mark 7s and 7.5s, as they become cheaper, more accessible, I'm sure there's a lot of new people entering these platforms. So just thought this would be helpful. And yeah, that's really all I have to add to that. So if you have any questions, just let me know in the comments and I'll get back to you. And that's really all I have. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.